Thanks for watching Your Plates Are Mine, where you don't have to be a professional chef to be a star in your own kitchen. I'm your host, David Miller, and I'd like to invite you to spend a little time with us as we meet some great new friends who are going to show us how to make something incredible you're going to want to make at home. Thanks for joining us here at Beans Creek Winery in Manchester, Tennessee. Today we're going to tell you everything you wanted to know about wine, from the vine to the bottle and a little cooking in between. Well, before we get too far down the road making wine, we figured we should come to a vineyard and find out about growing grapes. Well, we're here in Warren County with Jimmy Passons. Jimmy, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for coming.
Jimmy is a grape grower.
Yes.
Grape farmer, I guess, technically?
Well, I don't know if you'd call it a farmer or not, but anyway, we grow grapes.
And we've got a variety of grapes out here. What kind of grapes do you grow?
These here are Chambersons.
Chambersons. Mm-hmm.
And besides the Chambersons, we grow Chardonnays.
Chardonnays.
And we grow a Golden Muscat, and that's the three that goes into making wine.
Okay.
We have 3 different varieties of table grapes,
mm-hmm.
which one of them's a Steuben, which has seeds in it.
Right.
And then we have a Vanessa and a Hemrod,
mm-hmm.
and they are seedless.
Okay.
But we only have 2 or 3 vines of those,
mm-hmm.
and they're just for us to eat, and that's the only reason we've got them. We don't try to go on the fresh market with anything.
Oh, okay. If somebody wanted to put a grapevine in the backyard, about how long would it take for it to produce some grapes?
Well, if you set it out in the spring of the year, which is the best time to set out grapevines.
All right.
Set it out, and if it gets up, 4 or 5 foot the first year,
mm-hmm.
Most people that are experts in the field say they've done real good, and then the second year they get out on the trellis system like you're wanting,
mm-hmm.
and then the third year pick a few grapes off of them.
Okay.
And then the 4th year, then they're ready to start.
Oh, all right.
So that gives you an idea kind of how.
Okay. So you can expect this in year 4? Big bunches like that?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Really?
Yeah. You should have.
I was just being smart.
Yeah, you should have clusters like that.
Wow. How is your connection to Beans Creek?
Well, when I had the grapes the first year,
mm-hmm.
My wife and I talked about what we're going to do with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept saying, well, we'll get something and we'll try to make a little wine out of them. I'd never made any wine in my life. I didn't know how to make wine. But it seemed like every time we had planned on going and getting anything to put them in to
mm-hmm.
make wine, something always came up and we couldn't go.
Right.
So they got close to ready to being ripe, and we said, we got to do something with these grapes. And one day, Tom Brown called me
mm-hmm.
and asked me if I had some grapes. And I said, yeah, I've got some. And he said, well, what are you going to do with them? I said, well, I'd sell them.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, can I look at them? And I said, sure, come on. And he came up and looked at them. He said, I'll take every one of them.
Great.
And he told me what he was doing,
mm-hmm.
that he was starting a winery, putting in a winery. And the next thing I know, we were investing in the winery and
mm-hmm.
got to be part owners in the winery for a while.
Great.
And enjoyed it. It
mm-hmm.
was an interesting experience.
You supply grapes for Beans Creek and some other wineries as well?
Other wineries.
mm-hmm.
Beans Creek gets most of the grapes.
All right.
I've sent them to Beach Haven in Clarksville.
Mm-hmm.
I've sent some to Arrington.
Mm-hmm.
And I've sent some to Grinder Switch. And also this year, the first time I've ever done that,
mm-hmm.
is I sold a ton of grapes to a Catholic church in Nashville, and they're making their own wine.
Oh, Jimmy, thanks so much for having us out, teaching us about growing grapes, the different types of grapes, and wine grapes versus table grapes. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for coming out, and anytime you want to come back, just come on back. And anybody else that wants to come out here, just come on out here. We'll be glad to take them through the vineyard. Let's go back to Beans Creek.
The grapes go into this, which is the
receiving hopper.
Then they're going to come over here.
It feeds them into the crusher destemmer, which inside the crusher destemmer is a cage with a shaft that runs in the middle of the cage with little fingers sticking out that beat the grape off the stem.
Right.
And then after the grape is taken off the stem, it spits the stem out the back.
So it's not actually crushing them flat and really squeezing them, it's just not breaking the grape.
Right, it doesn't press them. This is actually what it looks like when it comes out of the crusher destemmer.
All right.
As you can see, some of the red skin is broke off for the meat of the grape. And then the juice, we've strained this out to get our to do some of our lab checks on it, the sugar level and the pH.
All right.
So we'll take this in the lab in a little bit and check the pH on it and the sugar level.
So this is where the science part comes in.
A little bit of chemistry.
Little chemistry, little science.
Yeah.
And then how you adjust that is where the art
Right.
comes in.
And you could give this same batch to 4 different winemakers, the same fruit.
Same thing.
And you'll end up with 4 different wines.
Right.
There's no winemaker that can make the same wine out of the same grape.
Right. So everybody's kind of got their own little recipes, little tweaks to change it just a little bit.
Other, and you know, the style, what variety of yeast you use has a lot to do with it.
So you don't use like the bread making yeast and put that in now.
No, this is winemaker
Wine
yeast.
All right. So this is just crushed grapes on top.
This is crushed grapes on top.
The juice is soaked or settled to the bottom.
Yes, actually the skins have settled to the top, if that makes
all
any
right.
sense. So I'm getting a little bit of liquid now.
There you go. Wow, you can really smell that.
Yeah.
And now how often do you have to mix this?
About twice a day.
Twice a day.
In these bins.
Now what stage is this in the process from vine to bottle?
This is in the fermentation stage right here.
So this is basically, you process the fruit, and then this would say be stage 1 after processing?
Yes. This is actually, it's fermenting. If you can see some of the bubbles, that's kind of from where I've punched it down, but it's also from the CO2 releasing from the fermentation. And that's why the reds are done a different way than the whites.
Right.
If we had done whites today, they would have gone straight to the press.
To the press.
Right.
So the grapes were crushed
Yes.
and destemmed, but not pressed.
Not pressed, exactly.
Okay, what's the difference between crushing and pressing?
Crushing is just is breaking the fruit.
All right.
Like what we showed in the bin a minute ago. And that's a crushed berry.
Right.
All that does is separate the stem from the grape.
Okay.
The pressing is where you separate your juice or wine from the solid,
all
the
the rest
skin,
of the stuff.
meat, the seeds.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
That's the difference in crushing and pressing. The press
Gotcha.
is where you take your liquid from your solid.
Okay, and that's why all the grapes that are still in the hose, I'm not sure if you can see that, still have the color.
Right. There's a little. Most of the red you're seeing is some of the juice, but some of the juice was still kind of greenish looking, white, which fermenting on the skin will pull that color pigment out of the skin to make it a red.
Okay.
Even though it's a red grape, you still got to get a little bit of skin contact to get that color.
Okay. Okay.
And then this will stay in here for probably 10 days, possibly somewhere around in there.
Now this is a primary fermentation?
Yes, this is primary. It'll stay in here for about 10 days, depending on how long it takes for it to ferment.
Right.
In here, we do a pump over, where we showed the punch down a minute ago in the bin. We do a pump over on this, where we pull the juice out of the bottom, and then we'll pump it back over into the top.
So that basically mixes it.
Right. It was the same thing we did earlier.
Great. And then from here, after it's through the primary, it'll go to the press. To the press.
Which is outside.
And that will separate all the solids out and leave you with just fermented grape juice? Or is that actually, what do you call it at that stage?
It's actually wine. It has alcohol.
Wine. Okay.
But it actually, after we press it, we put this through a secondary fermentation.
All right, so the primary fermentation is done.
Right.
Then it goes into
the press.
The press.
From the press. Then that separates the juice or the wine from the solids.
From the solids.
Then from there, we'll put it into one of our tanks.
One of these tanks. Okay.
Which is just a smaller version of what it's in now.
Right.
To complete the fermentation, which includes the secondary
fermentation. So once it sits in here, about how long does it typically in the second stage?
It takes probably about a month or two to complete the second stage.
All right, so now after the secondary fermentation, they come down to
the oak barrels.
The oak barrels.
To age, to pull the oak.
The oak flavors, those hints, those notes.
Right. And our oak barrels are toasted. Rather than a whiskey barrel being charred.
Okay.
Because the whiskey is looking for the color, where we're basically just looking for the oak flavors and the nose of the oak.
Right. Now, how long do they stay in here?
It varies. Could be anywhere from some of our, like the Chamberson, maybe only about 12 to 14 months.
All right.
Up to some of our other reds, possibly anywhere, maybe up to 3 years.
Wow. Well, let's go upstairs, meet your dad, and he can tell us a little bit more about how the winery got started, his background, a really neat story about how he got started in the basement.
Actually, in the pickling pot in my grandmother's kitchen.
Even better. So, well, let's head up and talk to your dad. Incredible place you have here. I mean, I'm really blown away. I didn't realize the level of sophistication and the size of the operation. How did you get started?
Well, my mom and dad lived in Hillsborough and farmed, and my mother had all these grapevines in the backyard. You know, did her 52 quarts of juice or 52 pints of jelly or all this sort of thing down through the years. And a buddy and I were going to go fishing one afternoon. His dad decided to go with us. Joe looks out over the backyard and says, "Helen, what are you going to do with all those grapes?" And she threw up her arms and said, "Birds can have them, I'm through." So anyway, we did not go fishing that day. We picked grapes and used my mother's crocks to make the wine in, and we made wine. It was very drinkable. We know that because we drank it. So, you know. Started entering regional competitions, local, regional, state, and then in about 1992 or 3, took a gold medal for my champagne at the Indy International Wine Competition.
Okay. Now, was this all still at home in the basement?
At home in the basement.
Okay.
Yes. This is my 36th year to make wine.
All right.
Only our 8th to do it here at the winery.
Okay.